Hello, BookTube. It's Roz of Scanning Down About the Books,
And Tilly from Tilly's Shelf.
and we're back with our one of our monthly. We've read some relatively new work of fiction, and we're going to share it with you. And this month we read Small Joys by Elvin James Mensah. Now, Mensah he's a young author. He's in his late 20s, and this is his first published book. He grew up in Southeast London, part of the world that I know, and he's sort of Ghanaian heritage, and so it's a book that's obviously grew out of his experience and a time. He says himself, he was a depressed gay British Ghanaian man, and he's written a book about a depressed gay British Ghanaian man, but there's a bit more to it than that. Do you want to say a bit more as you have the book in your hand?
Well, you said I should introduce the book, but you've just given quite a good summary, I think. So it came out in 2023, and it is published by Scribner. And this is his second completed novel, but first published. But he'd worked on a sci-fi story that didn't work out, and then this one's maybe a bit more personal, but at the same time he's given it some distance from himself. And I would say it's kind of like a bit of a slice of life type story about the main character, Harley, and his sort of found family of close friends, and how they navigate a particular phase in their lives together. So it's not a plot driven story. It's very much about characters and their life and experience.
Yeah, it's sort of character and relationships story rather than plot. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. And there's a selection of interesting relationships in the book, and I guess that's its strength.
Yes.
Yeah. The book starts
so
with,
we have this set of I was going to say we have this set of central characters, which is the friends group. So Harley himself, his friend Chelsea, who he's known previously for a long time, her best friend Noria, and then these two newer additions to their kind of friendship network, which is Muddy and Finley. That they're the central kind of network. The way that their lives play out. So.
And then we also get two fathers.
Yes.
His father and Noria's father, and two kind of.
Yeah, I'd say we also get Muddy's grandfather as well. If we're talking about father figures, the role that Muddy's grandfather kind of plays in bringing him up, or has played previously in bringing him up.
So relationships between friends and potentially lovers, and relationships, because there's sort of various sort of girlfriend, boyfriend sort of combinations, and then relationships with father figures are sort of themes of the book. The book starts with one of those sort of like enormous coincidence sort of setups. I really liked the opening scene of the book. Our main character, and this is not a spoiler, our main character is Harley has just dropped out of university because of depression and anxiety. It was a course he really wanted to do, but he just couldn't sort of, couldn't hack it, as it were. And he's come back to stay with Chelsea, who he shared a flat with before, or house. And he goes to the woods, and he's maybe thinking about suicide. And this man that he doesn't know kind of bumps into him in the bushes, more or less. You're like, what's this bloke doing in the bushes? Of course, we later find out that he was bird watching, and he turns out to be his new housemate, the other person that Chelsea's renting or subletting a room to. But he didn't know that, and it's so it's like a kind of big kind of coincidence sort of setup. Now, if the book had been full of coincidences like that, I wouldn't have liked it. But it worked for me as an opening. It was
Yeah.
quite strong, I thought.
Yeah, I would say I was initially a little bit worried of like, oh, is this going to be the level of coincidence that's going to be going through? But yeah, it was just I guess a meeting point between those characters
Yeah.
where Muddy got to see Harley at that intensely vulnerable and risky moment without them knowing each other beforehand. So
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
a setup that was needed for the dynamic that those characters had.
That follows, because in a sense this is also, it's very much a book about found family, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
how we care for each other, how we look after each other in our friendship networks, and I guess the kind of the tension and worry that goes with that care. If you're friends with somebody that you know has been dealing with that level of
mental ill health,
mental ill health, the way that affects the way you might sort of feel towards them, and to the extent a degree of sort of protectiveness or concern that can't be completely done away with.
Yeah. And I think it's definitely a book that I don't know, kind of celebrates kindness.
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, the title, like the small joys, the kind of picking up on the little things in life that kind of pull you through.
Yeah. And I think you know, I felt towards the author, Mensah, I felt a sort of, well, I felt like this was a really caring book, that I felt like he was thinking about how it would be to read this book if you were sort of, I don't know, young, gay and depressed, you know, if your parent is not accepting of, you know, your identity, you know, if you're low, if all that, he was sort of, you know, thinking gently of that reader. And
it's a very supportive book.
Yeah.
It's like it's saying, yes, there are ways to find hope, and there are ways to find a way through this, even if it doesn't feel like it at the time.
Yeah. So that I kind of I warmed to that.
Yeah. I think you said it's a bit like a big hug of a book.
Yeah, and he actually said in an interview, or he wanted it to be a warm hug of a book, and he definitely. Now that for me is in a way a little bit of a problem, because I don't tend to read warm.
You don't like happy books. But I think it's right for it to be an overall an optimistic book, and it's right. It's not like, without going into spoilers, it's not like everything has a simplistic resolution at the end, because life doesn't, and it's very much it leaves things open at the end of the book to an extent in terms of which direction the characters are going in. But I think it's right to have books that allow optimism to characters that have gone through those difficult times, and to not present it as like, oh, actually it's all gonna be awful.
Yes, no, absolutely, and that's true. So I've had to put to one side my sort of perhaps preference for the, you know, the deeply miserable and grim, and you know, but actually there are some very, I mean, the most sort of some of the most moving or sad bits in the book are about his relationship with his father, and how you keep hoping that perhaps your parent will come through for you or come good for you, and what if they don't? What impact does that have? And that was, you know, very moving.
Yeah, and the way that his dad sort of handled his sexuality, and how that impacted on his whole identity. I really liked that there's a phase in the book where he meets a therapist, and I really liked how Mensah made that therapist also be a black man. And there's characters with various different racial identities in the book, but that gives him a role model of an older black man who is willing to accept his sexuality, and it's something that he's not experienced so much before. Although Nuria's father as well is open and accepting, but it's like it gives him a way of being like able to accept that it's okay to be black and gay, which has been part of his identity difficulties.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, up
yeah,
to that point.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that yes, absolutely. And Noria's father is a brilliant character. He's a really
Yeah,
funny, warm, and like I said, not like another version of how a sort of a Ghanaian heritage
I don't think
parent would
they're.
be. Or perhaps they're not. No, there's
No, I
I
think
can't
they're
remember.
Nigerian, but yeah.
Anyway, but you know what I mean. That's sort of, it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's not all
But his father's
not everyone.
approach isn't the only approach
Yeah,
to.
that you might do. And but the relationship, one of the relationships that I found, like in a way, the central relationships are between him and his friends. But the relationship in the book that I almost found the most interesting was the relationship between Muddy, Harley's friend Muddy, and Muddy's friend Finley and the rest of the group, because it like Mensah sets out to try and it, like the bloke, what it is to
Yeah,
be a young bloke,
yeah.
like that's a very English
So
term, but sort of like the whole masculinity thing and how you know,
yeah. So Muddy and Finley have been friends for years, like since years and years and years. And you get this kind of feeling that they're almost friends by habit, but they don't necessarily have a lot in common, and yet they've got this whole history between them. That even when Finley, I would say, I see what you mean about bloke. To me, maybe it's a generational thing. I'd call him a lad.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and he's really a lad's lad, and you can kind of see that side of Muddy as well in his kind of like, there's a bit of rugby kind of
yeah,
banter going on, and
yeah,
so on. But yeah, how their dynamic changes as in a way they grow apart, or they discover different parts of their identity. Muddy becomes someone who's um maybe moving towards questioning his sexuality, for instance, which is something that Finley
like Finley's
this process.
yes, default setting is, oh, oh, mustn't be gay, mustn't be queer, or, got to push that away. That's all, it's like that's
Yeah,
where he's come from. That's innate. And him sort of uh, uh, then moving on from that or getting a better,
yeah,
it is really the key bit of
yeah,
the
yeah.
story.
That Finley's grown up with this world of
Ugh.
I suppose casual homophobia,
Yeah,
and not,
absolutely.
yeah, absolutely no level of sort of questioning of that from him. And then the fact that he then has to think, actually, like, this is these are my friends.
Yeah,
How do I handle, like, how do I
yeah,
talk to people, and then saying things and having to be called out on that. I thought that was
yeah,
handled in an interesting way, because
yeah,
this book is set in the past, like set around 2005, and I kind of remember growing up at that time, obviously younger than these characters are, but that kind of the kind of vocabulary that Finley uses very casually was just accepted, in a
yeah,
way that I think now, I'm not saying that things have changed completely, but I think things have moved on a little bit, that people wouldn't say that without maybe being questioned, or it being noticed a little bit more.
yeah, yeah. Yes, I think so. Or then maybe we're in our bubble that is sort
Yeah,
of,
maybe we don't. Yeah,
but no, I think it was a deliberate choice to put it in 2005, because
yeah.
it kind of just sets that little bit of distance. So it's contemporary, but a little bit of distance.
But also, I suppose, being in 2005, there's a lot of references to sort of the London terrorist attacks. So you've got that kind of sense of threat and unease that's impacting on the characters. And one thing that's really clear is that Mensah loved the cultural references of that time. So you've got loads of sort of music, you've got Blur, Oasis, things like that, kind of coming into scenes in quite an active way. So he
Yeah,
clearly sort of did his research on that aspect.
yeah. I know. I'm sure he grew up listening, and the oh, I know I can't think of any of their names, but like Missy Elliott and people like that.
Yeah,
That obviously
yeah,
people he
the
was
rappers, yeah,
that he was listening to as a child, and they would come in. So that, yeah, so that is lovely. Like it is a first published book by a young author, and I think it's fair to say that it, you know, that you can see that if you know, I mean, like you feel like this is an author who's finding his voice and developing. There were
and I would
things,
be interested to see where he goes next, with
yeah,
that voice that he's kind of building, I suppose.
yeah. Thinking of voice, one thing that I really liked about the book, which I think didn't work quite so well for you, was I thought the dialogue was really, really strong. I loved the dialogue in the book. I thought that was one of its the interplay between characters verbally, and how I got their character through their dialogue was great. But
Yeah, and that surprised me because I kind of struggled with the dialogue in places, and I think that's because there's quite a lot of accent involved. So Muddy is Mancunian, Finley's family are Scottish, Chelsea's kind of
from sort of Kent, southeast
Kent,
London
yeah,
border,
or
yeah.
Essexy, yeah, crossover.
Well, Dartford, so yes,
Yeah,
that's top bit of Kent, yeah.
yeah, and those accents are written into the way that the characters speak, and I'm really bad at putting
Oh, and of
on
course the
yeah,
fathers, you know,
British
yeah,
Ghanaian accent, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm really bad at putting on accents in my mind. So that meant that those sentences sometimes read a little bit awkwardly because I should have been saying them in a very, particularly with Muddy, should have been saying them in a very Mancunian way in my head, but I just couldn't quite get that to work. And so it just made it a little bit stilted in places for me. I think that's a me problem. And maybe if I'd listened to some Mancunian accent to try and get the flow of it, or I think you had it as an audiobook as well, which presumably helped. I might have done a bit better.
Yeah, I was flipping between audio and print, and I think that really helped with some of the different accents, so that's perhaps why I enjoyed that side of it more. So I mean, overall, as I say, it was a warm hug of a book. I did enjoy it. It's not going to be one of my sort of books of the year, I suppose, but I could see how it could be for another reader, if you know what I mean. If it was more,
I think if it resonated with you a bit more.
Yeah. I think if it hit certain personal, connections for you more strongly, you would love this book even more, as it were. And if you want to get a sense of that, watch Sean's interview with Elvin, Sean Breathes Books, who talked to Elvin James Mensah about the book, and in that interview, I just completely fell in love with he's just such a sweet young man.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Before we finish,
Yes.
I think we did just both briefly want to mention birds.
Oh, yes.
But this is a criticism of an editor, rather than like it. So Muddy is a bird watcher, and that's quite important to his character. And seeing specific birds is quite emotionally important to him. And now we're both not devoted, but quite happy bird watchers. We like spotting things as we're out and about walking. And I think both found some degree of frustration from the birds that are referred to in terms of their the likelihood of seeing them, I suppose. Where it, particularly with starlings, for me, it's made, and you can see how it happened, because if you look up a starling, it is a red listed bird. So it does seem like it would be very
red listed means, for those that aren't into this sort of thing, it means that they're recognized as being at risk as a species. And that's because there used to be, millions and millions of starlings, and now there's just thousands and thousands. They're declining rapidly, but there's still loads of them.
So their conservation status is more about the decline that they've had, rather than, and it was like the day that I finished reading this book, I went to my local Tesco's and saw 5 starlings in the car park. So I felt that an editor should have picked up and said, oh, okay, we're focusing on this bird, let me just quickly check with the bird watcher. And like there's places you can go to in the country very easily see thousands of starlings.
Yeah. So where I live in Brighton, we have murmurations of starlings at certain times of year when you literally see thousands of them moving in the sky there. It's a beautiful and wonderful thing, and
Absolutely an inspirational thing.
inspirational.
And
I love a
absolutely
starling.
something that a bird watcher would love to pieces. But I suppose it's the way that it's framed as not saying that that's something that's
yeah. So but you know, that like that we just had to express that because
that's a
both
very
of us,
niche.
as we were reading it, we both messaged each other saying, starling.
But then there's a broader issue there as well, like we were saying, around sort of access to nature,
Yes.
and the fact that sort of information about nature, that kind of, yes, you can look something up on the internet and you can find out that level of information, but sort of information you gain through with nature is still something that is it's a very white space in Britain. I suppose.
Yeah. So I think we should stop there on Small Joys, and our September book you've chosen.
Yes, and it's by Elif Shafak, and it's There Are Rivers in the Sky. Gosh, I didn't write down the name. Is that right?
It is. There Are Rivers in the Sky, which literally just came out this beginning of this month, I think.
Yes, and saw a few different reviews, some more positive, some less positive, but thought it sounded like an interesting one to try.
Yes. So that will be our September choice, and happy reading, everybody else, in the end of August and into September. And if you've read Small Joys, we love it when you tell us what you thought, and if you've read and if you've read Rivers in the Sky too, or are planning to. Farewell.
Bye.